There's been an influx of Chinese-made SUVs into the Australian market over the last several years, and in fact that number has doubled in just the last 12 months. MG have proven to be a very reliable and well-respected brand, but how does their main rival GWM's Haval stack up with the Jolion? Well, let's find out. On the surface, the Jolion is a good-looking, great value small SUV, and this top-of-the-line Ultra model has just about every bit of kit you'd expect to find in a top-spec model. But there's one or two problems. Even though this is an affordable SUV, there seems to be a few issues with build quality. Now, this car has only done about 8,000 kilometres, and yet there is a lot of condensation built up inside these light clusters. Is there a bit of a water leak there, maybe? Water leaks aside, these light clusters actually look pretty good. Underneath the tailgate, we get a 430 litre storage space, which I actually managed to squeeze an entire electronic drum kit into yesterday. I was quite impressed. Knock down the rear seats and you get a total of 1,133 litres of space. Side on, and you can see the Jolion rides up pretty high. We've got roof racks up on top here, and the top spec Ultra gets 18-inch alloy wheels. And the front of the Jolion looks really good too. I like these light clusters with the daytime driving lights extending down there, and the front grille is a little bit blingy for me, but it is certainly distinctive. And unlike MG, which you could easily mistake for Mazda, the Jolion is very much its own thing. Under the bonnet, and the Jolion gets a 1.5 litre turbo-powered petrol engine which drives its power to the front wheels only and outputs 110 kilowatts of power and 220 newton meters of torque. There's a 7-speed dual clutch transmission, and average fuel economy comes in at 8.1 litres per 100 kilometres, which is just okay. The interior of the Haval Jolion looks really good too. There's a nice mixture of shapes and materials, not too much hard plastic, but on closer inspection, the plastic actually is a bit cheap feeling, and some of this stitching here along the dashboard just doesn't feel particularly strong. I can imagine that coming undone. But we do get soft touch materials and a nice big center console screen here in the Ultra model that is 12 inches big, and that is a really good size screen. It's very sharp and very colorful, but unfortunately the software is not terribly good. Some of the functions are actually just a bit hard to find. You've really got to go digging deep into menus to do things like turning the seat heating on, for example. And although they do win bonus marks for using the micro gamma font that I use for this channel, unfortunately they do lose points for some of their English translations from Chinese because they're not always grammatically correct. And there is no native navigation or digital radio, it's AM/FM only. There is, however, wired Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and the images from the 360 camera and the reversing camera are all very, very sharp. When I first got into this car, I could not find a USB anywhere, but then I found one up here next to the rear vision mirror, which is a bit of an odd place to put it, I thought, and then I actually found two more which are impossible to see from the driver's point of view. They're over here on the passenger side underneath the console. I haven't actually laid eyes on them yet, but I can feel them. Apparently they're there. Climate controls are also operated through the center console screen. They're pretty easy to use. We've got wireless phone charging underneath these air vents here. The gear shifter actually has a really loose feel to it, which I didn't quite like at first, but now I really appreciate, because you can get into this car, turn it on, and you just turn it with abandon and you're in drive, and turn it back and you're in reverse. The storage spaces next to the gear shifter are a little bit curious. I mean, you could put your phone in there, I suppose, or maybe even here in this skinny one, but I don't know what you're going to put in this tiny little one here. I mean, you couldn't put a pen in there, it would disappear, you'd never get it out again. We've got two different size cup holders here underneath this little panel, and a decent sized center console bin with a nice soft lid, and again some of that stitching there as well. Head-up display on the windshield, which is fine, and then we've got the digital instrument cluster under that, which works really well. You can apparently change the view of it in a few different ways, but I can't figure out how to do it, and that's actually true of a number of settings in this car. The settings menu itself in the center console screen is just not very helpful, and I can't work out how to turn off beeps that are going off all the time and various other functions. It's just beyond me. I mean, I could relent, I suppose, and look at the owner's manual, but you know, you should be able to work out this stuff without having to do that. Steering wheel is fine, it actually feels pretty good. It's got a leather wrap with stitching, paddle shifters here. I think the only way you can actually change the volume on the sound system though is to do it with the steering wheel. I can't find any other controls for the sound system in here anywhere. So that could be a little bit annoying to your passengers when only the driver can adjust the volume. The steering wheel has tilt adjustment but no reach adjustment, so you can't bring it forwards or push it back, it's only up and down. The leather seats are actually very comfortable. My wife said that this is actually the most comfortable car she's been in recently. That's a big call, and look, I'm inclined to agree, it is very comfortable. No lumbar support, unfortunately. The driver gets 6 ways of electric adjustment, manual only for the front passenger. Both front seats are heated, but there's no ventilation. And just on the door panels, where you think there would be soft touch material, because there is some stitching here, it's not actually stitching, it's fake plastic molded stitching on hard plastic. And the back seat of the Jolion, there's actually a load of room back here. This is really good. Okay, behind my own seating position, I'm 190 centimeters tall, and nowhere near the seat in front. Plenty of foot room. And the seats are actually very comfortable. This is good. Plenty of headroom too. Okay, a win for backseat passengers. There is I wouldn't call it a panoramic sunroof, it's a large sunroof, but it does provide a nice view, but it does get very hot in here, especially on a warm weekend like today. We've got 2 air vents for rear seat passengers, and there are 2 USB-A ports down here as well, and an armrest with 2 cup holders. So this is actually a pretty good place to be. So the first thing you notice when you get into the Jolion is how loud the indicator is. It is really noisy. But confusingly, if there's another alarm going off, like another bit of beeping, warning you about nearby traffic, the sound of the indicator turns off altogether, so you're actually not sure if it's on or not, which is a bit of a strange function. The suspension does feel just a little bit bouncy. It's not perhaps the smoothest ride. I mean, that's not to say that it's rough or firm, it's just gets a little bit unsettled on a few little bumps I've encountered, and there are a lot of potholes around at the moment, and it does come, I don't want to say unstuck, it's just unsettled. So driving on the freeway, there's not a lack of power actually, it performs actually pretty well. It does get just a little bit noisy at those higher revs. It sounds like it's just getting a bit sort of throaty and getting towards the edge of its capabilities, but in day-to-day driving, no problem at all. The lane keep assist actually works pretty well. You can feel it sort of gently nudging you back into the lane if you do happen to veer on it. Over here on the A-pillar is a driver attention warning monitor. Most car manufacturers incorporate that into the instrument cluster, but Haval have got it out here. And that tends to go off at weird times. I will be just starting a journey and it will think that I'm not paying attention and start beeping at me and getting me to acknowledge a message on the center console screen saying, hey, don't sway. Even after you acknowledge it, the beeping continues. It's just incessant. Of course, it's not happening right now because reasons. The Haval Jolion actually really does feel a lot bigger than it is, and that becomes evident when you compare it to some of its rivals, especially like the Hyundai Kona. This car feels substantially bigger than that, and I think it probably is. I didn't get my tape measure out, so I'm not exactly sure, but it's a bit of a TARDIS like that. Oh, there's some of the famous beeping. I knew you wouldn't let me down. Oh. There we go. There's just that little hesitation when you put your foot down. You hear the engine sort of spool up a little bit, but nothing happens, and then suddenly it's like it catches and jerks forward. It takes a little bit of practice. This is a top spec small SUV, and there are plenty of them available on the market, and look, I've got to be honest, most of them do things better than this car does. There is a lack of attention to detail, and it's just not the highest quality. But it does cost several $1,000s less than all the other ones. So it's a bit of a value equation. You got to work out what's more important to you, the money or the quality of the car. So that is the Haval Jolion Ultra. It is unbelievably good value for the amount of money you pay, and it comes with a 7-year warranty. But the problem is attention to detail. If GWM can fix a few things and not change the price of the car, then they have a real chance of becoming a major player in the Australian automotive industry. I mean, look what happened to Kia. 15 to 20 years ago, they were making cheap cars that weren't very well made, and now they are one of the best car makers around. And I think, given time, the exact same thing could happen here with Haval.